please subscribe to our channel. The Continental, from the World of John Wick, or simply The Continental, is an American crime drama television miniseries developed by Greg Coolidge, Kirk Ward and Shawn Simmons that serves as a prequel spin-off in the John Wick franchise. The Continental takes us back to a time when Winston Scott was still not in charge of the infamous hotel, and he was happy with his life in London, when something happened and he was again pulled back into the world of crime. Frankie, his brother, had gone to prison and saved Winston from getting convicted in the year 1955. He wanted his brother to move away from that swamp and start a fresh life, but fate had something else planned for Winston. Frankie stole a very valuable artifact from Cormac's safekeeping, and after that there was no going back for Winston, and he knew that he would have to become a part of the system, as otherwise, people like Cormac would never let him lead his life peacefully. Winston had established his empire in London, and he knew the kind of sacrifices he had to make in the past to get there. Apart from his brother Frankie, he had nobody left, but he had moved ahead of the past traumas of his life and made something out of the opportunities that he had been bestowed with, as he has always had a business mind. Winston gave Mr. Davenport the idea of investing in the parking lots that his company was constructing. He told Mr. Davenport that everybody in the United Kingdom was making skyscrapers, but nobody was thinking about where those thousands of cars were going to be parked. Winston said that this central parking lot would have the space to accommodate each and every car, but the proposition failed to impress Mr. and Mrs. Davenport. Mrs. Davenport was especially against it, and Winston even ended up calling a few well-known people who had invested in his project so that Mrs. Davenport would get to know about his credibility. Mr. Davenport finally decided that he would invest in his business and left the scene. Later in The Continental, we got to know that Mrs. Davenport was having an affair with Winston, and it was a well-planned move to speak against the project so that Mr. Davenport agreed to it. Winston was having a conversation with Mrs. Davenport when suddenly, a few men entered his apartment and kidnapped him. Winston was taken to the infamous Continental Hotel in New York, where he met the manager of the place, Cormac, who was, in a way, responsible for destroying Winston's entire family. Winston was told that his brother, Frankie, whom he hadn't met for ages, had stolen a priceless artifact kept in the safety vault of the Continental. Winston said that he didn't know where his brother was, and he had no clue what he had been up to. Cormac let Winston go, but he asked his men to follow him. He knew that he was going to contact Frankie, and through him they would come to know where he was hiding. We had seen at the beginning of the Continental episode 1 how Frankie, with the help of another man, had broken into the vault and stolen that artifact, after which an entire army of mercenaries started looking for him day and night. He had promised his partner a sum of 40 grand in return for his services, and when that man got caught by the adjudicator, he was told the amount was nothing in front of the actual price of that ancient coin press. Winston went to Charlie, the man under whose care his parents had left him and Frankie when they were kids, as he didn't know anybody else in New York whom he could trust. Charlie gave Winston a car and an address where he could find his brother, and told him to be cautious, as people like Cormac were bad news, and they wouldn't leave him unless and until they got what he wanted. Winston went to meet Miles and Lou, who were apparently friends of his brother, in their dojo, and he came to know that they used to work with Frankie once, but he had sort of betrayed them and gone his separate ways. They told him to go to Alphabet City, as they believed that he could be hiding there. Winston went inside an abandoned theater in the Alphabet City, and before he could do anything or react in any manner, a woman came in front of him, and before he knew it, he was hanging from the ceiling with a noose tied around his neck. Frankie came and cut the rope, and asked him up front about what he was doing there. Winston hadn't expected that kind of behavior, especially not after he had gone to extreme lengths to find his brother and make sure that he was safe. The woman was Frankie's wife, Yen, and she was of the opinion that they should kill Winston, as she did not trust him one bit. But Frankie knew his brother, and no matter how much he hated him coming there, he could never hurt him. Frankie told him why Cormac's men were behind him, and he knew that they would have to escape from that place as he had a lot of trust in Cormac's abilities, and he knew what he was capable of. Winston, Frankie, and Yen were able to trick Cormac's men. And that's when the manager of the Continental decided that he would have to outsource this job and call in the lethal twins, Gretel and Hansel, to get back his artifact. Winston went back to Charlie's den and asked him to arrange for their escape. Charlie had a helicopter ready for them when someone from his group informed Cormac about their whereabouts. The twins arrived at the scene, and Frankie realized that all three of them wouldn't be able to escape from there. Frankie once again sacrificed his life to save his brother and his wife, Yen. He told both of them to take care of each other and jumped from the helicopter with the artifact in his hand, giving the twins a free shot at him. Hansel took a shot, and Frankie died on the spot. After Frankie gave his life to save his family, at the end of the Continental Episode 1, we thought that Cormac would now get the artifact that he so desperately wanted back. But it was not so, and he had been deceived by Frankie. Frankie had probably speculated how things would pan out for them, so he had hidden the ancient coin press somewhere, and he was just carrying the empty box with him. Winston and Yen could have chosen to run away from there, but their conscience didn't allow them to do so. They came back once again to New York and went directly to Lou and Miles' dojo and asked them for guns. It meant that Cormac's position as the manager of the Continental was in danger. On the one hand, he didn't know what he would tell his bosses, as he didn't have the artifact with him, and on the other hand, there was an aggrieved brother and a wife who were not going to stop unless and until they took revenge. So that's the Continental Season 1 Episode 1 recap, Brothers in Arms. I hope you liked this video. Please leave a comment and subscribe to this channel. See you in another video. Bye.